Hello to anyone watching this. So in the big Switch 2 Direct we got our first look at the next Nintendo Warriors game, and it's another Hyrule Warriors! Hooray! Like, I'm perfectly excited for Age of Imprisonment. You know, its setting looks completely distinct from Age of Calamity, and its cast of characters looks relatively interesting. And it'll be especially interesting to see how well Zelda can carry one of these games as the main character rather than Link, and just in general, it'll be nice to see how much this game can improve upon Age of Calamity, you know, content-wise, story-wise, and especially performance-wise. But, you know, it's times like this that make me think about how nice it would be for any other, or indeed every other Nintendo franchise to get a Warriors game. So today I just wanted to put out a concept for a Nintendo crossover Warriors game, which is an idea that I've had for a good while at this point. It's just, you know, now seemed like a better time than ever to talk about it, really. But before I go any further, I do feel a need to put out the obvious disclaimer that I'm not a game developer, and so if anything in this video sounds unrealistic, it's probably because it very much is. You know, the only real guideline that I've given myself is to stick to the firstest of first-party franchises and developers and all that sort of thing. But still, only working with that, there's so much potential with this idea. So yeah, I wanted to start with the characters here because this is where I have the most ideas for this game. So, in my view, if you're going to do a big crossover game like this, it's really worth running with the idea as much as you possibly can, because, you know, this isn't going to be like Smash Bros, where every single character has to specifically represent themselves and how they appear in their franchise, you know. Warriors' movesets are a lot more fluid. Like, there's a reason Link got 7 in the original Hyrule Warriors. It's because you can basically give anyone anything, and as long as you can realistically see them swinging it about a battlefield, killing hundreds of opponents at once, you know, that's all that really matters. You can truly do anything with these movesets, and I really want to take advantage of that here. So my big concept for this roster is that every character is going to be paired up with a different character from another franchise, and they will be forced to work together. Presumably through some sort of story MacGuffin, like a mystical chain or pair of handcuffs that if they both touch they're just locked together and have to work as a pair on the battlefield, because I will be including some hero and villain pairs in this list. So yeah, I just think that that's really the best idea for a crossover Warriors game, because it truly takes advantage of the crossover aspect in my view. And just in general, I think with some of these pairings, you can really easily visualize the concept that I'm only really able to talk about. Like, some of these pairings will feel really natural. And on top of just having the one basic moveset where they work together, I want every pair to have 2. You know, some will be like just sort of stance changes, while others will pretty much mean that you control the other character. Like, it'll make sense as I explain it pair to pair, but yeah, I just think everyone should be in teams for this game, really. I think that'll be the most fun. And I'd want these moveset changes to be on the fly, just like weapon changing in Dynasty Warriors 7 and 8. So you just tap a button, do a quick attack, and you've stance changed. So yeah, I think that puts a definitive need on this roster to feel as natural as possible in every single aspect. And one last thing before I get into all of these pairings, I'm not going to go into like specifics about what I'd want to see from every move of every moveset. You know, I'm just putting out the general concept for these movesets and let you imagine what each attack would look like. You know, I think with just the general descriptions I give, you'd very easily be able to imagine it, and that's what I love about Warriors movesets. You know, as long as you understand the concept, pretty much any attack can feel quite natural from there, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's get into all of these pairings. So first up is Mario and Ridley, who I mainly put together because they both use fire attacks, and I think that just gives them quite a natural sense of synergy despite all of their obvious differences. Like, in the main moveset, you can imagine Mario using fireballs for his strong attacks and Ridley following up with like fire blasting. And then for their alternate movesets, you know, Ridley can just sort of pick up Mario and fly around with him and swing him about to attack everyone while Mario desperately tries to throw out fireballs to keep up, you know? Just like everything with Mario, this is sort of the most standard idea I have. So if you don't really get what I'm going for with this, I don't think much else is going to make sense here. Next is Peach and Slippy Toad, who I think would work well together due to both of them having the innate characteristic of allowing others or other inventions to do a lot of the fighting for them. Like, I'm not saying that's their big overarching characteristic in their own series or this game. I just think that sort of idea could work really well for them as a pair here. Like, with their first moveset, I can imagine Peach running around only really doing physical attacks with her parasol and maybe a couple intervening toads, while she uses loads of Slippy's inventions to sort of throw out in front of her and do loads of area of effect damage. While in the alternate moveset, Slippy gets to use the inventions how he wants, while Peach just gives various support bonuses during the strong attacks, you know? I think something like that would be nice and not at all demeaning to their characters, you know? Next is Bowser and an Inkling, which is a pair I want to see together mainly because I think Bowser could have loads of really interesting interactions with Inkling's ink. Like in their main moveset, you know, Inkling could provide cover fire or throw out various secondary weapons, and if you ink opponents you do extra damage to them, but you also ink the floor, which I think Bowser could use in various shell attacks. Like, he'll move faster going over the ink, and so yeah, I think that'd be a good sense of synergy there. Meanwhile, in their alternate movesets, I think it would be cute if Inkling basically rode around on Bowser like a crab tank from Splatoon 3 to do various attacks with Bowser swiping and using way more primary weapons from Inkling for various types of damage, you know? Just one of those cute, endearing pairs. Next is Yoshi and the Chorus Kids, which is definitely going to be one of the least conventional teams I suggest here. Like, their main moveset would pretty much entirely focus around Yoshi with his quick and fluttery standard attacks, while his strong attacks can have him flick out his tongue in some way so he can eat up enemies and turn them into eggs, which the Chorus Kids can carry around, and if all three of them have an egg, they'll throw them out rhythmically with the next strong attack and something cute like that, while the alternate moveset can pretty much have Yoshi conduct the Chorus Kids to appear somewhere and attack in rhythm. So yeah, I can't really explain it the best, but I just think there's a lot of potential with these two. Next is Donkey Kong and Marx, which is a team that I think would be able to very easily translate their abilities from their home series into this game. Like, the main moveset can revolve around Donkey Kong basically treating Marx as Diddy Kong, you know, carrying him on his back and letting Marx fly him around for various attacks, while the alternate moveset can have Marx roll around on top of Donkey Kong like one of his balls from his boss fight. So yeah, just a lot of potential synergy here. Next is Link and Oatchi, which is another pair that just very naturally feels like they fit together, you know? Their main moveset can pretty much be a tweaked version of Link's Epona moveset from the original Hyrule Warriors, where he rides around on Oatchi for various attacks, but you know, it can be much more involved steed-wise this time, while the alternate moveset can have Link dismount and just do all his normal sword attacks, while Oatchi just goes about and does whatever he wants, really. You know, he could go after a clump of enemies or pick up an item or just something cute. Next is Zelda and Rossetti, who I could imagine working well together with a kind of trapping-based moveset. You know, Rossetti will go off to stun a load of enemies by shouting at them, while Zelda throws out various types of magic for the main moveset, while the alternate one could more so revolve around Rossetti attacking himself with his pickaxe while Zelda just provides some cover fire, you know? It's one of the ones where the different movesets would feel a lot more like stance changes than anything, but still, I just love the idea of these two working together. Next is Ganondorf and Luigi, which is a pair that works together amazingly well on a character interaction level, let alone on a moveset level, where for their main one, I can imagine Ganondorf's potentially short range being made up for by Luigi using his vacuum to pull enemies in close. So basically everything would be like Ganondorf's up tilt from Smash, and I think that would just work really well. While the alternate moveset can focus more on Luigi getting to use all of the different attacks his vacuum has, while Ganondorf again provides more cover fire, and maybe he could go out a bit further and sort of punch enemies towards Luigi. Next is Kirby and the Bros, which, like, I hope you can immediately guess what I'm about to suggest here. You know, all of the strong attacks in their standard moveset would involve Kirby sucking up one of the Bros and then using all of their attacks for his standard string until he gets rid of them or sucks up a different Bro. While the second moveset could involve Kirby more so inhaling all of the enemies, which for this game I don't think it would be realistic for him to have a copy ability for every single possible enemy he sucks up. You know, I just have him sort of inhale them and then spit them back out as a star to attack people. I think that's just the most realistic you're going to get with this type of game. Next is King Dedede and Aaliyah, which is a team that might only work well together conceptually, but still, I just like the idea of them together so much, I still want to suggest it. So, for their main moveset, I just have them, you know, swinging their hammer and sword together, you know, just working well as a team, while the alternate moveset would involve King Dedede putting on Aaliyah's emblem ring, getting an entire different costume redesign look, and just being incredibly powered up, you know, really being a 2-in-1 fighter power-wise. Like, just King Dedede having an emblem ring costume is just too good of an idea to pass up, in my opinion. Next is Big Man and a Flock of Cuckoos, which he would essentially treat as his crowd. Like, the main moveset could involve him crowd surfing and doing loads of attacks from there, while the alternate moveset could be him sort of singing and pointing in a direction that he sends off all of the cuckoos in, you know. Quite a basic concept, but still one that I think would have so much charm. Next is Samus and Anna, which is the first of a couple teams here, where the overall concept is that each of their moveset has one of them on the ground and the other supporting in a vehicle. So here Anna could have just her bow moveset from Warriors while Samus flies around in her ship, while the other one has Samus doing Samusy lasery things, while Anna goes around in her tank from Warriors. Next is KK Slider and Meta Knight, which is another potentially kind of conceptual pair, where the first moveset involves KK walking around, strumming on his guitar, sending out damaging sound waves, while Meta Knight appears and disappears in the background, slashing his sword to the beat. While the second moveset involves KK just playing his DJ turntable, drawing all enemies towards him, while Meta Knight kind of works as a bouncer, slashing at enemies as they get too close. You know, that might not work the best with Warriors as a game, with Meta Knight being incredibly, like, almost inconsistent with how he appears, and KK being entirely static while letting enemies approach him might not be the best in terms of making it fair and letting him take damage, but again, I just think this is a really fun idea for them. Next is Bones and Spike, which, like, yeah, this is pretty much just an excuse to put together my favourite Animal Crossing villager and Mario character, but still I do have a fully formed concept for these two, where the main moveset could involve Spike latching onto Bones' back, spitting out various spike bars for Bones to throw about, and then spiky balls for him to hit for the strong attacks, while the alternate moveset could involve Bones popping Spike onto the ground so he can start swinging about various, like, fishing rods and bug catching nets and various Animal Crossing-y items, while Spike just sort of sits there and spins about spike rods and throws out spike balls to do extra damage, and maybe if Bones can run into one of these spiky balls while he's attacking, he could ping it off in a direction for extra damage, you know? I just really want to see these two together at some point, some game, sometime, somewhen. And if you take offence to this pairing being too personal, then you can just swap Bones out for a human villager or your favourite Animal Crossing villager, you know? Plenty of opportunity for costumes here. Next is a bunch of Pikmin and Rob, which is obviously inspired by that one cutscene in Subspace Emissary where all the Pikmin start climbing onto a giant Rob and have fun exploring him. You know, that was one of the first things I thought of when I was coming up with this concept, and I really think it deserves to be represented. So the main moveset could be the Pikmin sort of piloting Rob to swing about his arms and maybe use his burner at some point. You know, basically all we have for Rob is still just his smash moveset, so I'm going to lean on that a lot, especially for the second moveset where I'd have the Pikmin dismount, run around, do all their normal attacking while Rob sort of shoots lasers after them. You know, maybe you could have one Pikmin hold up a little target for him to aim at, or something sweet like that. Next is Little Mac and Palutena, which is another relatively simple idea where the main moveset could be Palutena bestowing various heavenly boosts to Little Mac to power up all of his attacks as he goes, while the alternate moveset could involve Palutena coming down and performing various attacks on enemies which stun them so Little Mac can go off and finish them off with all of his punches. Next is Pit and Fox, the other main ground and vehicle split team, where while Pit is on the ground, Fox can support in the R-Wing, while when Fox is on the ground, Pit can support in the Lightning Chariot. Next is Ike and a bunch of Waddle Dees, which is heavily inspired by King Dedede's tendency to just sort of smack Waddle Dees about during his boss fights, bless him. So the main moveset would pretty much just be normal Ike sword swinging antics, where Waddle Dees just sort of act like projectiles in strong attacks, while the alternate movesets could be the Waddle Dees going about sort of pinning down various groups of enemies so Ike can come in and properly finish them off with his sword. Next is Andy and Springtron, definitely the most time-sensitive team to add in relevancy-wise, but still, you know, no matter when this hypothetical game comes out, they'll be a fun team to have around, where in their main moveset, Andy would basically pilot Springtron as a kind of tank, you know, performing various tweaks and adjustments to give him better firepower as the attack string goes on, while in the alternate moveset, Springtron would basically play as he does in ARMS but translated into a Warriors moveset, while Andy just sort of swings around his spanner in the background. And lastly, we have the Miis with their Wii Sports appearance and an Octorok, which in their main moveset will essentially work like a ball launcher, which the Miis will be able to smack at enemies using a tennis racket or golf club, and of course will just in general be able to go crazy at enemies with a tennis racket. Like, I really hope they'll be able to reference just wildly waggling your Wii remote to swing a tennis racket in this game. And the alternate moveset could have the Mii riding on an Octorok, where the Octorok will just keep shooting out projectiles while the Mii punches at enemies using boxing gloves and fun stuff like that. You know, for the main customizable character, you need something that's quite universally understandable, and I think this is it. So yeah, those are all the pairs that I wanted to talk about for this base game. Obviously there are thousands more potential combos that could be used for DLC and stuff like that, and just in general, obviously none of these pairs have to be like this. There are probably better potential ideas for movesets that could come with different combinations, but still, I just wanted to take an opportunity to put all of my ideas out there that I'm really passionate for, and just in general, I think this group of 40 characters would be a really fun, eclectic representation of Nintendo. So yeah, I just really appreciate being able to take the time to go through and explain them all like this. But anyway, there are of course plenty of other characters that need to be added in. You know, what's the point of having all these warriors if there aren't thousands of innocent looking pawns for them to kill off? So in terms of the enemy representation in this game, I just have it to be where each franchise that at least has some form of enemies within them can have like the little guys, the slightly bigger little guys, and the proper general big little guys. You know, don't need to make it too complicated. And this is probably the best point to talk about, you know, character growth, and more specifically what types of materials I'd have each enemy spit out to use to upgrade all your characters. Basically, I'd just have little emblems representing each series in, you know, bronze, silver and gold rank. You know, little guys drop bronze, middle guys drop bronze and silver, big guys drop silver and gold. And if you bump into one of the main playable characters, you could get like one gold emblem for one of their series and a silver emblem for the other one series. You know, I don't really need to go into any detail about character growth because you can easily just imagine everyone leveling up and getting various powers. I just like going through these things because, you know, this is where you get a lot of the grinding for these games of desperately trying to get as much material as possible. So I like to try and calm myself down in my head by thinking about how you can distribute these materials in the fairest way possible. But anyway, the other main type of enemy representation for each series that I'd want to include are big old bosses, which in the Nintendo Warriors series tend to be some of the most contentious parts of each game, whether they're incredibly monotonous and repetitive to take down or just needlessly grindy to chip away at. But I think if they use the same format as Warriors Abyss, where every boss has a sort of barrier health bar that you need to take down while they're constantly attacking you, and if you use a strong attack while they're flashing after they do one of their big moves, you can do a bit of extra damage to the shield, and once that's taken down you can go at their main health bar for a while. You know, I don't know if that's just because of the roguelike nature of Warriors Abyss where I'm extra strong, but that boss format just seems to work, and I think that could be applied to every future Nintendo Warriors game, hopefully. So yeah, I think that this nice big suite of bosses, some of which are like obvious picks, but others are like, oh wow, what a retro throwback to characters that are still referenced a couple years ago and are playable in golf games. You know, I just think that this set would be cool to have. And obviously you'll probably end up with some unique original giant boss that's secretly controlling everyone and distributed all the bonding handcuffs, and you know, you're going to end up with OCs in this game, so just chuck them in as well, and I think you'll have a nice wide range of bosses with all sorts of varied attack patterns, and maybe, you know, there'll be extra tricks where, say with King Bob-omb, you could deal extra damage to him from the back because that's how you dealt with him in Mario 64. You know, you can bring in all of their unique traits, and yeah, I just really hope that the bosses in future games can learn from Warriors Abyss and be, you know, quite tolerable. But, you know, what's the point of having all these enemies to fight if there are no stages to fight them on? Now, there are multiple different ways you could do stages for this game. You know, you could just have one area from each series and just base an entire stage around that, but for me it would be way more interesting if you just had each stage be a kind of biome you'd see in every series and have little landmarks and vignettes from each of them to fill it out. So, say if there's an ice stage, you could have loads of buildings from that new Kirby and the Forgotten Land DLC, but you could also have that weird common observatory from 3DS Rosalina's Ice World from Mario Kart. You know, you could get like really specific with the references while still making it feel cohesive as a themed stage, if that makes sense. Now, most of these crossover games have about a dozen stages in them, and I would want the first 8 to be, you know, grass, desert, ocean, ice, forest, sky, mountains, and volcano. But, you know, the other 4 can be complete wild cards. You know, they could be cities, or theme parks, or space, or, you know, anything. But as long as you can just sprinkle in proper landmarks that you could maybe even explore into each of these stages, you know, I think that would make all of them feel really unique, as well as making them easier to traverse because you sort of know where each part of the stage is and how to navigate it, so you won't get lost if the rest of the stage and all of its corridors are a bit more generic, if that makes sense. And I think having the stages like this also provides some parity with the character roster I've suggested, because, you know, it feels like this crossover is truly crossing over if different aspects of each series can be smashed together like this. So yeah, I just think this is the best way to go about stages for this game. But now we've gone through all the main things you'll find in a battle, let's go through all the modes you'll get to battle in, starting with story mode, which format wise can just sort of be identical to like the original Hyrule Warriors, where it's sort of just a straight linear line of battles where you gradually recruit various characters for your party, and there can be a part in the story where you split up and go to different areas with certain groups of characters. You know, that's all you really need. But I would also appreciate if there were some extra battles and maybe even side stories for specific characters, you know, where they were before you joined up, and, you know, just stuff like that to keep you entertained. You can have little collectible trinkets in, you know, maybe you could do both Sculptures and Anna's Treasures in this game, you know, combine those aspects of the previous Nintendo Warriors games. So yeah, that would be good for the format. In terms of the actual plot, you know, I'll just get what I'm given. I really don't want to make any promises here because I'll just end up embarrassing myself. I'm not good with all this fan fiction-y stuff. You know, as long as the story can get from A to B and then from B to C and then from climax to resolution, you know, it'll all be good. You know, that's all you really need. You can't expect anything too grand from this. You know, at least it's not going to be like Age of Calamity where it'll just be complete non-canon that spits in your face. You know, at least you'll expect it here. I will say though, I do hope the story mode can be integral to the character progression system in this game. You know, I'd want all the characters to be unlockable solely in this mode, and I'd want each pair of characters to have a stage that kind of revolves around them. You know, at least in terms of focusing on how they're getting on, and have their second level of weapon be unlockable through some criteria in that stage. You know, I feel like something like that would be good, just to hammer it in that you're really working with the pairs in this game. You know, they're not just two characters fighting together, they're two characters working together and having to get along, you know. Games like this really thrive on character interaction, and the story mode is really going to be the only place where you can truly bring that out without just having to resort to generic bantery lines, if that makes sense. So yeah, I really want a lot of love to be put into the story mode. So moving on, next is your basic free mode, where you can go back and play any unlocked story stage with any unlocked characters, and you can have extra Sculptures / Anna's Treasures to collect with characters that you previously couldn't use. And I'd also want the characters that you have to use to collect these things have like some sort of special interaction within the stage as you play through it. Like, say you go back to the first stage as Bowser and Inkling, you could have Mario be like, whoa, Bowser's helping us? What a weird scenario. You know, just some cute little extra thing like that that makes it feel like a properly different playthrough of the stage, even if it's some minor way like that. Because, you know, as far back as Dynasty Warriors 3, they had special interactions depending on what characters you used in free mode, and I really think this game would be a brilliant excuse to bring that sort of thing back, to be honest. So next up is the adventure type of mode, you know, where you can go and put in dozens of hours completing hundreds of various types of missions to obtain all of the other main unlockables in the game, like further upgraded weapons, more Sculptures and Anna's Treasures, and extra costumes, which, as a little tangent, I'd want to be individually selectable between each of the characters in a team. So, say with Bones and Spike, you can individually change Bones to be any of the other lazy Animal Crossing dogs, as well as change Spike to be, you know, Stone Spike or Fire Spike. You know, basic customizability like that I think would be really appreciated here. But anyway, in terms of the format of the maps that you get to explore within this mode, You know, just like the other Nintendo Warriors games, I'd want each map to, in some way, follow a previous story from a represented game, which, you know, once again, we could just do the basic thing of ripping a vignette from a series represented here, but I once again want to do something unique and have each map sort of represent a general story beats that you find within a lot of the different series. So one map, for example, could be about saving damsels in distress. So it'll be split between Mario saving Peach, Link saving Zelda, and Pit saving Palutena, where each part of the map would essentially be its own individual story, but they'd still be able to intersect. So, for example, after Mario completes one battle, he'll be able to hit a button that opens a gate for him, and for Link as well. Or Pit could have to shoot his bow and arrow at something that's blocking his path, and the arrow will also somehow hit a string that's holding up some sort of block for Link. So, yeah, obviously I'd want the intersections to get more complicated as you go on, but, you know, if this is the first map, you need something basic to lull you into it, and yeah, I just think that'd be a quite compelling way to progress through these adventure mode types of maps. I would want there to be a good few of them, so every series can be represented in at least one of them, and obviously you'd have to get a bit more vague with the connections as you go on. Like, you know, one of them could be about building up your area, which could have, you know, Andy building up his army, Bones helping KK to build up a town, and, you know, more tenuous connections like that, which could still work. You know, Bones could send bells over to Andy to help fund something for him, you know, fun stuff like that. And obviously, even though each section of each map would be dedicated to a series story-wise, you would still find unlocks for anyone and everyone within the missions that you complete. And in terms of how many missions and battles each map would have, I would kind of want it to be more in the Fire Emblem Warriors format, where you can go around anywhere you want on the map and only certain squares will have a battle for you. But, you know, it still means that there'll be plenty of battles per map. It just means that you're more free to explore, which I think would work better for the story scenario that I am suggesting. So, yeah, new adventure mode, hooray, love it. So yeah, that's all of the main battling based modes covered, and the other main modes I'd want to include, like a gallery to view everyone's costumes and maybe an encyclopedia of every Nintendo game ever made, and a general options menu, are quite self-explanatory. So the last thing I'd like to go through is this game's shop, which, I mean in-game shop, not like a thing to take you to the eShop to buy all the inevitable DLC. This will obviously work in the same way as every other Warriors game, where you can sell and reforge your weapons and buy all of your character upgrades. The main thing I want to talk about here is its presentation, because I just think it would be so cute if every time you entered the shop, it would be manned by a shopkeeper from one of the series represented. Obviously, it would be completely random and have no effect on what you buy. You know, you won't get a discount for items for KK if Tom Nook is manning it. I just think it would be a really cute little touch to help bring the whole package together, and it'd especially be good just to see more characters from all these different series, and who knows, maybe you'll see other little NPCs and characters from each of these franchises walking around in the background of the shop. You know, just something like that is one of the neat details that this game really deserves. So yeah, that's just about every idea I have for this potential game. You know, I could go into way more detail about what I want every single adventure mode map or story stage to be like, but I just don't think that kind of detail is necessary here. You know, if you understand the basic framework, every other blank can easily be filled in with the imagination and other whimsical sentiments like that, you know? I just really hope that as we go into the Switch 2 generation, Nintendo will be more willing to embrace grand crossovers like this, because with Sakurai wanting to focus on Kirby Air Ride, you know, Smash Bros.'s future might be up in the air a bit, and you know, they could do crossover DLC for Mario Kart World, but I can definitely see them wanting some big, grand, specific crossover game for the Switch too, and I just think a Warriors game would be perfect for that. Like, it does feel as if over the past year, Nintendo's become much more willing to allow their franchises to share the spotlight within various pieces of software. Even if it's in smaller ways right now with the Nintendo Music and Today app, it does just feel like a good sign that there's going to be more interconnectivity between all of these different franchises in the Switch 2 generation. Even if that doesn't mean, you know, just casually doing crossovers every single year, I do feel like some massive game like this would just be a good way to celebrate everything that Nintendo is in a grander way than they're doing right now. So I don't want to say a game like this is inevitable, but I do just feel like some sort of Nintendo crossover Warriors game is going to happen at some point now. Even if that's just me being delusional, of course. But yeah, if you have any questions or concerns, do let me know. Just like with every other Warriors game, the thing I'd be most excited to look over with this overall package is its variety of costumes. Like, I can't tell you how many hours of joy I'd get out of being able to equip a casual KK slider and Galactonite combo. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.